Bonsoir, Monsieur le Président.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir, Monsieur le Président.
Vous avez choisi de vous exprimer dans les 20 heures de nos deux chaînes pour clarifier votre position sur notre engagement aux côtés de l'Ukraine. Alors, le
Good evening, President Macron. You've chosen to talk on Ukraine. And after an international conference, you surprised everyone by refusing to exclude to send troops in Ukraine. Then you called Europeans to not be cowardly, and then you said there was no limit, no red line when it came to French support to Kyiv. Did we understand this properly? Do you think we will send Western and French troops to Ukraine? Good evening and welcome. You are sitting here in front of me. Are you standing? No.
Est-ce que vous excluez de vous lever à la fin de cette interview?
Do you believe that you will be standing up by the time this interview is over? Yes, we will actually.
Nous, on n'est pas sûr de le faire, mais en tout cas, on n'est pas dans cette...
Well, we're not sure that we will send troops, but we're not in the situation yet.
Non, mais d'abord, il y a
Yes, but standing up or sitting down is not a matter of life or death. Yes, there's a matter of degrees. I do this comparison to explain what it means to not exclude options,
position qui consiste à
and the position which consists of saying simply what we are doing, giving us red lines. What is the situation?
Depuis 10 ans,
For the last 10 years, because this started in 2014, Russia has started a war of aggression against Ukraine. Then we did everything to establish peace, the Minsk agreements, the negotiation under French and German supervision with Russia and Ukraine. In this very room, there was the only meeting between President Zelensky and President Putin on the 9th of December 2019. And Russia, the regime of the Kremlin has decided on its own in February 2022 to launch the second step of this offensive, which is an all-out war against Ukraine, and not only the Donbass, because that's not the limit. They often bombard Kyiv, they attack Odessa, etc. We have one goal. Russia cannot and must not win this war. For the last 2 years, we've been helping Ukraine, and if things were to slip, it would once more only be the responsibility of Russia. This means that if we decide to be weak today, if in the face of someone who has no limits, someone who's gone beyond all of the limits that we imposed, if we naively say, I won't do this, I will never cross this line or another, in that case, you don't decide on peace, you already decide on defeat. And you've decided to say that. Yes, yes. And I accept that. It's the role of the French president in our institutions to say this sort of thing. The French president is in charge of national defense. He decides for the safety of the country what is at stake in Ukraine. An existential war for Europe and for France. I hope we'll come back to that because it's a key topic. And so I decide, because after 2 years of war, and I'd just like to remind you that we systematically did what we said we wouldn't do, which really changes the way you should hear at what other Europeans are saying. 2 years ago, we were saying we'll never send tanks, and we did it. 2 years ago, we said we'll never send missiles, and we did it. We said we'll never send planes, and some people are sending planes now. So we've put too many limits in our vocabulary. This is not an escalation. We're not at war with Russia. However, we have to be clear. We cannot let Russia win. But the French don't understand your vocabulary. They don't understand under which conditions French soldiers could go fight in Ukraine. Is it because the Russian army would break the Ukrainian front line? Is it in the case that a key city like Odessa would fall? You were not precise, but yes, but maybe I was right to not be precise. But the two conditions I've just talked about, are they science fiction or is it a possibility? For the last few years, we've been living in a world where what we thought unthinkable is actually happening. This is the end of this naivete that I talked about a few years ago. We have war on in Europe. Between Strasbourg and Lviv, there's less than 1,500 kilometers. Can you imagine? War is in this country, so it's not a fiction. and it's not far away. What happened? So all of these options are possible. The only person who will be responsible for that is the regime of Russia. Never will we start an offensive war. We will never take that initiative. France is a force for peace. However, today, to have peace in Ukraine, you mustn't be weak. And so we have to look at the situation, and we have to be determined. We have to be brave. We have to put the resources necessary to make sure that the Russians don't win. So we're preparing ourselves, we're training for operations, airstrikes.
Au sol.
La France n'a pas
Boots on the ground? Well, France has not waited February 2022 to start preparing. We have a full army. We have a deterrence force and we have an operational army. I'd like to remind you once more to honor our soldiers and their families. We are one of the few countries in Europe that for the last 10 years has had troops deployed in Sahel to fight terrorism. And we've lost dozens of people there. Yes, but it wasn't the same type of battle. Yes, but we were fighting Islamists we were fighting terrorists. So we were fighting domestic terrorists to prevent the sovereign state from collapsing and to protect our outposts. But do we believe? So we don't have to do that now in Ukraine, but does that mean we should exclude the possibility of doing it? What I've said is that we're ready, and I've decided at the start of my new term as French president, I've decided to make sure that we double the budget of the military. So we're not simply waking up today. I just want to clarify a point, which is that what's happened these past few months is a deep, deep change. And what I asked on the 16th of February with Zelensky, what led me to say what I said, and to decide on very hands-on steps with our allies. What decided all this is that the Ukrainian counteroffensive didn't go as planned, and the situation these last few weeks has been difficult for the Ukrainians. It's a very difficult situation. But they have limits. They have limits in terms of troops, because Russia is a larger country, and once there are only Ukrainian men, they have this limit. There's also a limit in terms of shells, in terms of missiles, because as I'm speaking, when Russia shoots 10 shells, we shoot one shell back. So you can see that this creates a situation on the front line which is very fragile. And the Russian regime has gone on a much harder political line these past few months. They've increased cyber and informational attacks in our daily lives on hospitals in France and in Europe.
En décidant de tuer des opposants politiques.
They've decided to kill political opponents. Yes, but this isn't new.
Mais je ne dis pas que c'est nouveau.
No, I'm not saying it's new. I'm saying it's like intensifying. Yes, but shouldn't the alarm bells have rung sooner? You can't tell me both that I'm ringing the alarm bell too early and that I should have rang it earlier. We did everything beyond ringing the alarm bells to be demanding. But what I'm saying is that the clarity that I have with Putin started in 2017 in Versailles, saying, you attack us, you manipulate our data, I was a victim of that, so we have to have a form of mutual respect, and you have to stop being a force for destabilization. At the time, we wanted to avoid war. Then we wanted to help Ukraine to resist. Now the context on the Ukrainian front is changing. Russia is changing at home and it's multiplying its attacks. So yes, I'm telling this to you very clearly. At the start of 2024, we need to wake up. So if we send soldiers, is it infantrymen? Is it advisors? Let's not talk about that.
Mais d'abord, je ne le souhaite pas.
We have to keep it in mind, but we shouldn't talk about it. Well, no, I don't want it to happen. I would like for Russia to stop this war and to retreat from its positions. Yes, but you don't believe that will happen. What's important is it's not what I want, but I shouldn't give visibility to someone who's not giving me any. You should ask President Putin where his red lines are. Yes, but your Ministry of the Military has given some visibility. He said we're not sending troops there. Yes, because he distinguished what we were implementing from what we need to do in case we need to adapt. We decided on the 26th of February in Paris that we should go further in assistance to Ukraine, create a coalition to supply them missiles and bombs that will allow them to hit Russian targets in Ukraine, not in Russia. We've decided as well to accelerate. We've decided to go look for ammunition everywhere where it's available. That's what I did in Prague as well. And we decided to launch 5 common actions, and we all agreed around this table, Europeans, Americans, Canadians, British. We've decided to clear the minefields, produce and repair equipment, deploy civilian forces at the border with Belarus, protect the border with Moldova, and have also defensive actions for cyber attacks on the Ukrainian ground. But you haven't. But they decided not to send troops, and they were very clear as soon as you said that. Yes, but we can come back to that. Yes, but that's the core of the issue. And yes, they're right, but that's what we've decided today, and that's a change. We decided that in Paris, and it's the start of this change. We will do what is necessary to reach our goal, because if Russia would win, the life of the French people would change. How? We will have no more security in Europe anymore. Who can think for 1 second that President Putin, who has respected none of these limits and none of his commitments, who can believe that he will stop? So what's going on in Ukraine today is part of France's vital interests. The security of Europe and the security of the French people is at stake there. And those are our vital interests. So you are using words that mean something specific. I'm talking about security. Yes, but you said it was an existential threat. Yes, I did. We've already suffered the consequences of this war. We've suffered these attacks. In several of our hospitals, we've had days of malfunctions because of this Russian aggression. We've had consequences in Europe, the price of gas, the situation of our economy, the cost of wheat. The economic imbalances are consequences of this war that Russia started. And if Russia wins this war, the credibility of Europe will be reduced to nothing. What would be the credibility of the EU if we let this happen? The safety of Europeans, what would be left of it? Do you believe that the Polish, the Baltic countries, the Romanians, the Bulgarians, do you think they'll be at peace? Which is nothing to say of Moldova, which is not in the EU currently, but would be threatened immediately. So what you're saying is that Putin will find other prey. Is that what you're saying? In the past, we've already seen regimes who would kill political opponents domestically and wanted to conquer everything we would let them conquer. So Putin would stop there if you won this war. Yes, and I believe that's a perfect consensus around that. The American president, the German chancellor, so only military power can stop him, and we have to stop him in Ukraine. Today, to repeat what Churchill said, we have to dare for peace. Wanting peace is not choosing defeat. Wanting peace today is not abandoning Ukraine. It's to be realistic, to be strong, and to be ready to adapt to the choices that Russia would do. And so if war was to come, was to spread to Europe, it would be the only choice and the only responsibility. It would be only the choice and responsibility of Russia. But if we were to decide to be weak, if we were to decide today that we wouldn't answer that, that's already a defeat, and I don't want that. But unlike what you are saying and what you want to believe, many of my counterparts agree. I was in Prague And next to me, the Czech president said exactly the same thing.
Vous aviez ici même, il y a quelques jours,
A few days ago, the Lithuanian president said again that all the options should be open, and he even has a mandate of his parliament to send troops. So, yes, we are in a position of leadership as we always were. In March of 2022, in Versailles, we decided on a strategic agenda, the agenda for the autonomous strategy of Europe. It's called the Versailles Agenda. And we were on the forefront. We had a debate on the possibility to recognize the candidacy of Ukraine to enter the EU. There weren't many people there. 2 months later, I was taking a train to Kyiv with Chancellor Scholz and Draghi, and the three of us were saying with President Zelensky that we were in favor, and we were deciding it would be the case. So things are moving forward. You simply need to impulse. Simply need to be clear, and it's my responsibility. And what I want to highlight is that my responsibility is the safety of the French and national defense, and our safety is at stake in Ukraine today. Today, March 2024, is the Russian regime, is it the enemy of France? It is our opponent. What is the nuance between enemy and nuance? We're not at war with Russia, but Russia is at war with us. There are cyber attacks. It's a form of war, of warfare. Russian agents in Paris caused agitation in Paris. Yes, it's a hybrid attack, but we shouldn't qualify these. So what would it take for you to call Russia our enemy? If Russia decides on a new escalation which would drag all of us into a conflict, and I hope that will not be the case, but for sure today Russia is an opponent. The Kremlin regime is an opponent. We're not at war with Russia and the Russian people. We support Ukraine. We do everything so that it can cause Russia to fail, because, quite simply, there is no lasting peace if there is no sovereignty and return to the borders, internationally recognized borders of Ukraine and Crimea. And the Ukrainians will have to decide on that. It's up to them to decide. There will be no safety or lasting peace if it's not the result of a negotiation led by the Ukrainians, and there will be no safety for the French if there is no peace over there.
Et la paix, je veux juste dire, la paix,
ce n'est pas la
capitulation de l'Ukraine.
Surrender of Ukraine.
Parce que tout ça, c'est déjà
the amputation of Ukraine, because that would already be choosing to be weak. So I believe there's a lot of coherence in the position of France since the beginning. However, there is an escalation from Russia, and this escalation, we must say that we are ready to fight it. Could Russia target you? You've refused to go to Ukraine recently for security reasons? No, not at all. It's what Russia said. You shouldn't believe them. It's interesting because the public debate is full of Russian false information, and a lot of people are sure of that now.
Arrive dans le débat collectif. C'est un de vos confrères qui me pose.
The matter of troops on the ground arrives in the collective debate because the Slovak Prime Minister, who's very close to Russia, says that the secret project is to send troops there. So we have to react every time. So why did I change the schedule? Because President Zelensky was coming to Europe for the security conference in Munich, so I proposed that he would come to sign the bilateral agreement here. And thanks to the very long discussion we had, I told him, well, rather than to be next to you in Kiev, it would be more useful if I could implement, if I could impulse this change with the Europeans, which is what we did on the 26th, and try to go further and to make everyone realize that things are changing and that they are changing quickly and that they are not changing the right way. And that's what I will say tomorrow in Berlin, where I will see Chancellor Scholz and their Prime Minister. Every week, President Putin threatens nuclear strikes. France is the only member of the European Union with nuclear weapons. Should we feel particularly targeted? First
protégés
of all, we should feel
parce que nous sommes justement cette puissance dotée.
most protected.
Et que
Yes, but he mentions France a lot,
c'est le
more than
sens
other
même
countries.
du
Yes,
choix qui a été
and
fait
that is the
par le général
meaningfulness
de Gaulle dès après.
of the choice of Général de Gaulle after the Second World
Ensuite,
War.
nous sommes prêts, nous avons
We
une
are
doctrine
ready,
qui est établie.
we have an
Et en
established
matière de
doctrine,
nucléaire,
and in terms of
faut
nuclear
peu de mots.
warfare, you need few words.
Et le nucléaire n'est pas un instrument de
And
déstabilisation.
nuclear weapons are not a tool for destabilization
La
and
Russie
threatening.
nous
It's
installe
a
dans un
tool for
face-à-face
stability.
particulier, donne une responsabilité
But do we have a
supérieure
specific
ou un poids
responsibility
supérieur
or
pour la France?
more weight because
Notre
of that?
capacité nucléaire
Our
donne d'abord
nuclear
une sécurité
capability, first of
française
all,
aux Français.
is a guarantee of security for the French
Ça nous
people,
donne une
one that
responsabilité,
few other countries in the
celle
world
d'être une
have.
puissance dotée de
It
cette arme.
gives us a responsibility, the responsibility of being a
Ne jamais
power
être dans
with that
l'escalade,
sort of
ni
weapon.
verbale,
So we must
ni
never
de
be
fait.
Mais pourtant, il brandit la
escalating
menace.
verbally. Yes, but
que ça n'est
Putin
pas-
does it.
Reprend vos termes sur les lignes rouges.
Ce n'est pas
And he uses
approprié
your words on the red lines. I think that's inappropriate
en arme nucléaire.
Mais est-ce
when
que
you
vous
have a
parlez
nuclear
plus à
weapon.
Poutine Depuis combien de temps?
You haven't been speaking to Putin for a while,
Est-ce
for
que c'est
several
pas un
months now.
handicap de ne
Isn't it a
pas-
handicap?
Écoutez, je lui ai parlé à chaque fois que
I've
c'était
I've
nécessaire.
talked to him every time it was
Je
necessary.
lui ai parlé
I talked to him
évidemment des centaines d'heures
for hundreds of hours before February
longuement entre février et
2022.
avril
I
2022.
talked to him a lot
Essayer
between
d'arrêter
February
cette
and
guerre et de
April to
négocier
try
la paix.
to stop
Et
this
à partir
war
du
and
moment
negotiate
où
peace.
lui-même
But
n'a plus respecté aucun cadre,
once he
c'est-à-dire
started to
contrairement à ce qu'il disait,
have
il faisait
no
pas une
respect
opération
for
spéciale que nous
any
condamnions déjà,
framework,
qui
he-
n'avait aucun cadre
as-
juridique, aucune
as
légitimité, aucune
he
légalité.
he was saying
Mais
that it
qu'il
was a
attaquait
special
Kiev,
operation,
qu'il menait
but
des
this
crimes de
was
guerre dans
false.
le nord du pays.
He was doing war crimes in the north of the country.
Pourtant, vous avez
So
prolongé quand même
from
dans le
that
mois de
standpoint,
septembre.
J'ai ensuite
discussion had no
une discussion
meaning.
ponctuelle sur la question nucléaire.
Then I had a few discussions
avons
on
pris
the nuclear
l'initiative
matter
à cause de la
specifically
centrale de Zaporizhzhia,
because of
la
the
ligne
Zaporizhzhia
en lien avec
facility, which
l'Agence
was close to the
internationale
front
de l'énergie
line.
atomique,
So we had
eh bien, de tout faire pour protéger
things that
cette
we
centrale.
needed
Et
to
donc,
do
j'ai eu
to
des
protect
échanges à ce moment-là.
that nuclear power plant. So
Mais-
that's when I talked to him.
Les discussions,
But the discussions,
tout à fait prêt à les mener.
I'm ready to have
Mais
discussions
encore
at any
faut-il
given
qu'on ait
time.
face à nous quelqu'un qui
But
dit la vérité
we
et dont
need to
l'intention
be
est de faire la
talking
paix.
to
Et ça n'est
someone
pas le cas aujourd'hui.
who's telling the truth and who's telling and who wants peace, which is not the case
Patriote
today.
russe, c'est un autocrate.
According to you, Vladimir Putin is a Russian patriot. Is he a despot? He's committing crimes against the civilian. So when you look at what he's saying, only a dictator
C'est le
could
président
do
de la
that.
Fédération de
He's the
Russie
president
qui
of
aujourd'hui
the Federation of Russia,
est pris dans
and
une dérive
today
personnel ou
he's,
répressive et autoritaire dans son pays
involved in
et qui a fait le
repression
choix
and
ces dernières
authoritarianism.
années de manière accrue
And
ces
these
derniers
past
mois,
few years,
d'être une
he's
puissance de
decided to be
déstabilisation
a destabilizing
en Europe
power
en lançant
in
une guerre
Europe
dont il a la
by
seule
launching a
responsabilité,
war that
et en
he's
menaçant la
entirely
sécurité de
responsible
tous.
for
mais dans beaucoup
and by
d'autres
threatening
théâtres
the
d'opération
security of
du
all.
Proche et
And in
Moyen-Orient, en
other,
Caucase, en allant jusqu'à l'Afrique,
in other
la Russie
theaters,
est une puissance qui
Caucasus, Africa,
Ne lui parlez plus, donc
Russia
ce ne
is
sera
a
pas
power
vous
that
qui négociez la
destabilizes
paix.
the world.
Mais
Qui
So
pourra
you
le faire?
won't
Est-ce que ce sera
negotiate
les-
peace.
un
les
ordre,
États-Unis?
Who could do
il y a un
this?
ordre des temps.
The
Je
Americans?
suis sans doute le dirigeant en responsabilité qui
I'm
doit
probably
parler.
the head of state that has spoken most to
On peut
him.
dire
Parce qu'il
qu'il
faut
y a un
être-
certain froid entre
Mais
vous.
il faut-
But now we can say that you don't speak anymore.
Et d'ailleurs,
No,
je ne veux pas
it's
ici les personnaliser, ça n'a
there's
aucun
something
sens.
personal about that. It would be meaningless to make this a personal affair. This is not a novel or a series.
On parle, non mais
Yes, but
on parle
Trump
de la,
speaks
de la
to
vie et
him.
de la mort. Et
We're talking about life and
loin
death. And
je suis informé. Et
as
c'est
far
pas
as
le sentiment
I
que Donald
know,
Trump soit président des États-Unis
I,
d'Amérique.
I don't feel like Trump
Et
is
donc,
president of the
aujourd'hui,
USA. Yes,
c'est
but he
clair,
could
il n'y a pas un
become
risque, il y a la guerre. Au moment
Right
où il y
now,
a des
we're
femmes et des
clearly
hommes
at
qui meurent
war.
en
Right
Ukraine
now, men and
par la
women are dying
responsabilité du
in
président Poutine.
Ukraine
Ce que je vous dis,
because
c'est
of
si
President
l'Ukraine
Putin.
tombe,
And if
c'est notre
Ukraine
sécurité qui est
falls,
menacée. Et
our
donc,
security will be
nous sommes dans un
at
temps
risk.
aujourd'hui qui est de
So
résister.
right now, we must
Et nous
resist.
sommes dans un temps, et c'est celui que j'assume, qui consiste à dire
And we must
si la
say,
Russie continue
if
son
Russia
escalade, si la
continues
situation
to
devait se
escalate,
dégrader,
if
nous
the
devons être
situation
prêts.
were
Et
to
nous
get
serons prêts.
worse,
Pour être
Et
prêt.
nous
we
serons
need
prêts.
to be
Et
ready,
nous serons prêts
and we
à
will be
prendre les
ready
décisions
to take the
qui
right
s'imposent
decisions
pour que la Russie
so that
ne gagne
Russia
jamais.
does,
Raison pour
so
laquelle
that Russia never wins
Et
this
la
viendra.
war.
France est en économie de guerre.
Et viendra.
Which is why
Et
you
viendra,
said that
je
France is in a
l'espère,
war
le plus tôt
economy.
possible,
And we hope
le
we will
moment
return
où
to
nous
peace
aurons
as
à
quickly
reparler
as possible
avec le président de la Fédération de
once
Russie.
we start talking to the president of the Russian
Et la France
Federation,
est en
whoever
économie de
he
guerre,
is.
disiez-vous au début
And
de
you were
l'année.
saying that France was in a
Regardez
war
les
economy. We were
chiffres
talking about
avec
shells
Anne-Sophie.
earlier.
Euh,
We look
à
at the
l'heure où on
numbers
parle,
with
la France
Anne-Sophie.
produit moins de 100
Currently,
produits par jour, sauf erreur
France
de
is
notre
producing
part,
less than
parce que les
100
soldats
shells a
ukrainiens
year. This is what Ukrainian
utilisent
soldiers
en quelques
use in a
minutes.
few minutes.
C'est très modeste. modeste.
Mais
Est-ce le maximum
very modest. Is it the most that we can do? It's modest and it's quite normal for this category because we do not have a defense industry which is adapted to a high-intensity territorial war, which was not something we had planned, and we never felt that we should have to
février 2022,
have this sort of war ourselves. At the start of February 2022, I've declared to all of the French industry that we were going into the war economy and we needed people to produce more and more quickly. On several key segments for the Ukrainians, we've done the work. The Caesar cannons, which are key to defending Ukraine, we've multiplied their production. And where we delivered a couple dozen since the start of the conflict, this year, because we've multiplied production, we are going to produce 75 Caesar cannons, and they're all going to go on the Ukrainian front. It's much more than what we've done since the start. We've multiplied our production by 3 categories of shells and missiles that are relevant for the Ukrainians. But yes, we have limits, and that's true for all European countries. And what do we do to face this? We increase our capacity, we increase the rhythm, but it takes some time because you have to create new production lines, new production structures, and we decided to create them in Ukraine because it's closer, it can go faster. It's what was decided with all of the partners, and it's what we're going to do hand in hand with Germany. Yes, they're going to be exposed to bombardments as well. What you are highlighting here is a contradiction in some of our partners who are ready to produce in the Ukrainian ground but not ready to go further. But maybe French engineers will be exposed in Ukraine. In the frame of this coalition, we are looking at the equipment we will be producing with them, and we're doing 2 more things in the short and medium run, because that's the war economy. In the short run, we're looking for ammunition wherever it's available, so we're going to look for ammunition in every country in the world. I'm not going to tell you which ones here because it's confidential. And we propose to buy this ammunition because it's a matter of speed. And then we use the European defense industry to produce a lot more. So how do we pay for this? Because we have budgetary issues in France. How are we going to pay for this war effort? First of all, I'm going to be very honest with the French people and with you. We cannot all say for the last 2 years that this war is an existential war, and to say that we're going to continue to live as if it's business as usual. So we've anticipated, because we have a military program law. We've doubled the budget of the military. We've made budgetary choices since 2022, and we are paying for the aid in Ukraine. So we've already funded 4.2 billion euros, and we're going to do 3 more this year. That's our commitment with the European Peace Facility, which would be acted in the European Council next month, and will give contracts to our defense industry to produce in France and in Europe more weapons for our Eastern Front and for Ukraine. We're going to use this money. We're going to use the money we have in the investment program so that we can produce in Ukraine with the Ukrainians. So Europe is mobilizing side by side with our national investment. On top of that, we also have to operationally look at the possibility that as Europeans we could have to take more decisions, which is to say fund more initiatives, probably by borrowing money. And what we were capable of doing during the COVID period, which was to say we are facing a shock wave, and we have to bring money from the markets by signing together on the market. That's what allowed us to hold on and to start up back again. And if the needs were more significant, so the Prime Minister of Estonia proposed that, and I agree with her. So what I want to highlight, since the start of our conversation, and for the last 10 days,
Il n'y a qu'un responsable,
There's only one person who's responsible for the situation we are in
c'est le régime
currently.
du Kremlin.
It's the
Mais nous
Russian
avons la
regime, and we have responsibility.
En conscience.
And I want to tell you that as the
je vous
President
dis-
of the
je
French
vous le dis
Republic,
Mais ce ne sera jamais facile.
Non, mais vous
It
avez
will
vu
never
ce
be
sondage, il y a eu
easy.
une chute
c'est
du
toujours-
soutien.
there's been a collapse in the popular
On l'a
support for
connu dans
Ukraine
notre
recently.
histoire. C'est
We've
toujours
seen that at other
facile d'aller chanter des cantions aux gens.
We've seen that at other moments of our history.
Parce que ça n'est pas populaire.
And I could tell you this tonight because it's not popular.
On est pour la
I
paix.
could tell you it's far away, we're in
Les gens qui
favor of
disent ça
peace.
aujourd'hui,
People
les
who
mêmes
are
qui
saying
veulent
that
pas
today,
d'ailleurs soutenir l'Ukraine,
those who don't want to support
ils font pas le
Ukraine,
choix de la paix.
they are not choosing
Ils font le
peace.
choix de la
They
défaite.
are choosing defeat.
Ils font le choix de l'abandon de souveraineté.
They
Parce
are
qu'ils font le choix dès maintenant
choosing
de
to
dire,
abandon
nous, nous
French
avons des
sovereignty
limites.
because
Et
they are
donc,
choosing
à
today
celui
to
qui
say
jusqu'à
we
présent
have
n'en a pas
limits,
eu, a pris
and
toutes les
someone who's never
responsabilités
had
d'agression,
any
nous
and
vous
who has
laissons
the
progresser.
responsibility of aggression, they're telling go ahead.
De ceux en Europe qui sont
Those in
de
Europe
ceux qui,
who
en France,
are saying that
eh bien,
in
très
Europe
clairement,
and in France
décident
very
de ne pas
clearly
Monsieur le
have
Président,
decided to not
quelques
support
jours,
Ukraine.
Sénat, Assemblée
A
nationale.
few
ont
days
prononcé
ago, the Senate
vote
and French
sur un
National
traité, un
Assembly
accord de
had to
sécurité que
vote
vous avez
on a
signé
security
avec le président
agreement that you
ukrainien.
signed with the
Plusieurs
Ukrainian
partis
president.
politiques se sont
Many
abstenus, ont
political
voté contre.
parties
Rassemblement
abstained or
national
voted
qui l'a
against
le Parti communiste,
the,
la France insoumise, ont voté contre.
the
Qu'est-ce que vous pensez de leur position? Ce sont
the Rassemblement
pacifistes
National,
plus stricts,
Bien
the
sûr.
ce sont des
left-leaning
instruments du Kremlin,
parties.
ce sont
Do you
des
think
idiots
they're
utiles,
pacifists? Do you think they're instruments of the Kremlin? Do you think they're useful
savez,
idiots?
J'ai constamment
For the
cherché
Kremlin?
à tenir l'unité du
I always try to unite this country since
Les
the
rencontres de
start.
Saint-Denis que j'ai menées, je les
We
encore
had
fait envoyer tous les
meetings
chefs
in
de parti et les
Saint-Denis.
présidents
I
des
brought
assemblées
together all the party leaders
il y a quelques jours. Et après, c'est
a
la
few days ago,
c'est le
and then
pluralisme politique.
everyone, it's just political pluralism. You have to respect that.
J'ai un désaccord.
But I disagree. I deeply disagree.
C'est que je pense
I
qu'aujourd'hui,
believe that
en
today,
conscience, choisir de
today
s'abstenir ou
to
de voter
choose to
contre,
abstain or to
un
vote
soutien à l'Ukraine.
against support to Ukraine
c'est pas choisir la paix,
is not choosing peace.
c'est choisir la
It's
défaite.
choosing defeat.
Et c'est très différent.
And that's a very different choice. And when they say that you are using the Ukrainian conflict for internal policy, well, we've already had this debate because the last presidential election started after the start of the conflict of 2022. This is ridiculous, of course, because the responsibility of this war, the responsibility
coups de boutoir qui sont donnés au front ukrainien,
of the attacks on the Ukrainian front, that is the responsibility of Russia.
c'est d'être
Our responsibility is to be in favor of peace. Our responsibility is to hold on to this European unity. And every time we obtain European unity, and we will obtain it once more, we have to hold our unity and we have to be strong. We have to be strong to deter, we have to be strong to resist.
Est consacré à la guerre en Ukraine.
So we're talking about the Ukrainian war. We must speak about another war which is going on in Gaza. It's done 30,000 dead
Atroce. Vous avez
with atrocious humanitarian circumstances. You've always said since the terrorist attacks against Israel that you were in favor of Israel's right to defend itself. Does Israel have the right to defend itself all the way to vengeance? Do you believe that the Israeli army today is acting well in the Gaza Strip? So I never said that Israel had an absolute right to defend itself.
C'est exact.
You said it had the right to defend itself.
Et je n'ai
Yes, but that has a meaning. I never said absolute.
La France a une position
France
constante.
has had a constant position since the start.
À un moment donné, en octobre dernier,
And in last October, we were probably alone in that position, and many people joined it afterwards. First of all, we condemned the massive terrorist attack launched by Hamas against Israel and its population. You also wanted to create a coalition against Hamas. It didn't really work. Well, actually, we are all dissolving associations that are financing Hamas. Yes, and that's what the
lutter
coalition
contre le
was.
Hamas n'est pas que votre
Fighting against Hamas, it's not just your story as
et donc nous devons agir.
an Israeli politician, so we are acting too. What are we doing? With several partners, we are cutting financing wherever we find it.
Et
Les autres
donc,
pays n'avaient pas trop compris au départ ce que.
Because people didn't understand really what you meant. The best way, you know,
gêner les autres, c'est de
to
ne rien dire.
not bother others is to not say anything or to simply repeat what everyone wants to hear. France has never done that throughout its history. We've always had a simple
Premièrement,
position.
condamnation implacable.
we condemn the terrorist attack. Then we said the safety of Israel is not only the business of Israel, which means you can't defend yourselves through any means necessary, but we are prepared to cooperate, for instance, on funding. Second point, you are a democracy, so you have a responsibility. You have to respect humanitarian law, international law, and which is why, as soon as October, France called for a ceasefire. We were the first European country that brought a resolution before the UN to obtain a ceasefire. In October, we had the only conference for humanitarian support to the Palestinians. And the third approach is a political approach.
Et de tous les États de la région.
Because the safety and the interest of all of the states involved is for there to be a legitimate response for the Palestinian need for a state. So the hostages, do you know how they are, if they're alive? Is anyone discussing for their negotiation? Thank you for mentioning this topic, which is a key topic. We've talked a lot with Qatar and Egypt.
Pour obtenir la libération
de nos otages are they alive?
libérés ces derniers mois. Nous avons
hostages who've been released. Yes, we still have 3 hostages.
Rien ce soir et vous le comprendrez.
I will not say anything this evening, and you will understand that.
Les discussions sont en cours.
Discussions are underway. The families have been informed.
Partenaires que je citais et j'espère.
I'd like to thank the partners that I've mentioned.
Vraiment que nous
and I really hope that we will see these hostages released. And I hope that beyond these French hostages, all the hostages worldwide will be freed, because this is really an unacceptable practice and broken lives. But there as well, we will do everything we can for peace.
Nous faisons tout pour appeler encore une fois au cessez-le-feu.
And we do everything we can to implement a ceasefire.
Merci à vous.
Merci beaucoup.
Très bonne soirée à tous. Merci.